Hello and welcome back to Breeze Gaming. Today we have a tutorial for you looking at how to load and draw an image from a file location on your computer into Python with Pygame. So essentially what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking an external asset and we're going to be loading that into Python with Pygame. We're going to be transforming it and then we're going to be drawing it on top of a screen with Pygame. So essentially, if you have any kind of external asset that you've created in like Photoshop or Illustrator and you're trying to load it into Python, to use in whatever game you're making, you can use this method to load, transform, and draw that image onto a screen. So to get started today, I'm inside of Jupyter Notebook and I have two different Jupyter Notebook pages pulled up. This first page right here, this is the complete code that I'll be working with today and showing y'all. So if you're just interested in the complete code, this is the final product that I'll be showing y'all today. And then right here, this is just some basic architecture that I'll be using as a springboard to get started with showing y'all how to load and draw an image into Python. So before we get started with the actual process of how to load and draw an image into Python, what I want to explain first is file location. File location is extremely important. So for my example, I will be using this PNG image called circle, and it's just a basic circle that I loaded in. And so whatever image you're using, if you're whatever PNG file or whatever other file you're trying to load into, file location is very important. So how Jupyter Notebook works, if you're unfamiliar, if you're using something else, it shows you all of your files and file locations. And I have a file for my tutorials in here, right here. And inside of this file folder, I have my two project files that I just showed y'all. And then I have the PNG file I'll actually be loading in as well in here too. So my biggest recommendation is whatever file you want to load in, keep it in the same file location as your program files that you'll be using for that image as well. This makes it a whole lot easier for Python to know what image you're trying to load in. So all I have to do is just put the name of the image in here, as long as it's in the same file location as my project, and it can load it in. So before we get started, I highly recommend putting whatever file you're trying to load in the same file location as your projects. So now that that's out of the way, let's go ahead and start walking through the code. So before I get into actually explaining how to load and draw whatever image you're using, I'm going to walk through the kind of basic architecture I have here, just in case you are confused or overwhelmed at all or not sure what's going on. I'm going to walk through everything quickly before actually explaining how to load an image in. So first of all, in this first cell, all I'm doing is importing Pygame, and I'm initializing Pygame as well so we can use it, and then I'm importing system. So when I return this, it imports and initializes Pygame, and I'm ready to use it. This next module is the display module, and all I'm doing here is creating and labeling the screen that I'm going to be drawing on top of. So screen equals pygame.display.setMode is creating and setting the size of the screen that I'll be using and drawing my image on top of. Pygame.display.setCaption is giving my screen a title, and then screen color is the variable that I created to set the color for my screen, which I designated as white. Down here, when I have the actual game loop, I use the screen.fill action to actually draw the color onto the screen. So this is just designating the variable for color, and then down here, screen.fill is coloring the screen using the color I designated, which is white. Now this image module right here is where I'll actually be creating and loading in and transforming the image. But down here is the game loop, and it's just a simple while loop, very simple and basic. For event in pygame.event.get is grabbing all of the events inside of the game loop, and more specifically, if event.type equals pygame.quit is saying, okay, are there any quit events in the game loop that are going to cause essentially the screen to exit? And if there are any quit events, quit Pygame and then exit the system. And that's all that's saying right here. And then inside of that while loop, I have the screen.fill that I explained, and then I also have pygame.display.update, which essentially refreshes and redraws assets and everything at the end of the game loop. All right, so now with all that out of the way, let's get to the meat of the content of this video and talk about how to load in and transform and draw images to a screen inside of Python. So to get started, like I said, I'm using this circle PNG, which is just a basic circle that I'm going to be just loading and drawing in. So to get started, we want to give our image a variable name, which I'm just going to call circle, and then we want to do pygame.image.load. And this is loading the image that we want to use. In this case, it is circle.png. And there we go. I have now loaded in the image that I want to use. And Python knows what this is and can find it really easily because it's stored in the same file location as my projects. Second, what we're going to do is we're going to convert this to a rectangle. So it's very important to note we're not going to just directly draw the image. What we're going to do is we're going to convert the image into a rectangle that then allows us to draw it onto a screen inside with Pygame. So whatever image we're going to load, we're going to convert that into a shape and then draw that onto a screen. So in our case, we're going to take our image, our circle image here, we're going to convert it into a rectangle, and then we're going to draw it onto a screen. And that'll make more sense once I actually return everything and show y'all exactly what I'm talking about. But what this circle_rect variable is doing is converting our image into a rectangle so we can draw it onto our screen. So what we're going to do for this is circle_rect equals, and we're going to do the name of our image, which is circle, and we're going to do get_rect, which is get rectangle. And that's essentially converting it into a rectangle. And from now on, we're going to use the circle_rect variable. So we're going to do circle_rect.x, and then we're going to do circle_rect.y. And this is setting the coordinate location for our image. So keep in mind whatever your screen size is, and put down whatever coordinate location you want your image to go to. So in my case, I'm just going to put this at 100, 100. And it's also important to note that Pygame is going to take the top left of whatever coordinate location you put down. It's going to put the top left of your image at that location. So if you put the very center coordinates of your screen, it's going to be off a little bit because it's going to put the it puts the top left location of your image on those coordinate locations that you put down. So just keep that in mind. So what we have done now is we've loaded on our image, we've converted it to a rectangle, and then we've placed that image to coordinates on our screen. Now let's go ahead and draw that image onto our screen. So we have our screen and we have our image. Now let's go ahead and draw that. Right here, we draw the color to our screen, and now we're going to draw the image on top of that. And like I've talked about in previous videos, it's important to keep in mind the order of which you're drawing objects. So you want to draw the screen color before you draw anything on top of that screen. So I used the analogy before of the sandwich on the plate. If our screen is our plate, you want to finish drawing that plate first before you draw anything that goes on top of the plate. So draw the screen, draw the screen color, and then what we're going to do is we're going to draw images on top of it. So to get started, what we're going to do is we're going to do Pygame dot draw. Let me make sure I have. Okay, not yet. So I'm getting a little ahead of myself. My apologies. What we're going to do is this step. So I have two things right here. What we're going to be doing first is screen.blit. So blit is it's a funny word, but essentially what we're doing is screen.blit allows us to draw that image to our screen. So what we're going to do is screen.blit, and the reason we're doing screen.blit is screen is what we're drawing on top of. So screen.blit, and we're going to do circle and then circle_rect. So circle is the the name of the image, and then circle.rect is the actual image that I'm going to draw on as as a rectangle. And this will draw using the variables that we've defined up here, at least the coordinate location that we defined, it's going to draw our circle image and the the source image, which is circle. That's our source image, and we're going to draw it as a rectangle on top of our screen using the coordinate locations that we just described. And I know I have like circle 2 and stuff going on here. Well, I'll explain that in a second. That's when I transform the image. But this is the basic loading of the image without any kind of scale or any transformations. This is the code that is going to load, and it's going to designate the location, and it's going to draw that image onto your screen. So I'm going to go ahead and run all of this, and hopefully it runs without any errors. Okay, boom. So look at that. So I know that's that's like a a quarter of a circle. So that's not exactly the full circle. So, but that's where the transforming comes in. So this is the screen, screen, title right here. And then this is the image that we have loaded and drawn on. we've loaded the image, and this is the location that I designated. 100, 100 is somewhere up here. And then screen.blit takes the source image. This first one is the source. This is our source image, which is circle. And then circle underscore rect is when we convert it to a rectangle and draw it onto our screen. So we have now loaded and drawn an image in Python with Pygame. But that is not the end of the video, because you can clearly see the problem that this is not a circle. So how are we going to fix this so we can actually put it on our screen in a proper size to where we can actually see the full circle? And that's where transforming comes in. So I'm going to go ahead and exit out of that, and I'm going to restart this entire kernel. Restart clear output. All right, so now we need to get to the actual transforming part. So what we're going to do is we're going to create another variable called circle2. And you can label this whatever you would like, but for simplicity, I'm just going to call it circle2. And what I'm going to do is Pygame.transform.scale. So we want to transform the image, and then we want to scale the image as well to change its size. And then I'm going to do just circle, and I'm going to make sure I'm doing this right. Yeah. And so we're going to do just circle is the source image. So circle is the source image that we're working with, that we labeled. And then we want to designate the size. So it's going to be two variables. I labeled it as 100, 100 for size for my image, but this will, highly depend on whatever image you're using. Maybe your image is too small and you want to upscale it. Maybe your image is just fine and you don't want to transform it at all. But this is the size, and play around with the size, see whatever you like is best. But this is the two values that will determine the size. It's important to note that if you put this is like the height and width size. If you put two different numbers, like if I put 150, your object will be distorted. It'll be off. And maybe that's what you want for your image. But if you have an image that you already like and you're just trying to change the size, you want these two image values to be the same. But I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about soon. So now we have successfully transformed our image that we loaded in to the size that we want. So now how do we translate that to the rest of this? So for simplicity's sake, I just named this circle2, but what we're going to do is we first need to change the actual, rectangle that we created. So all I'm going to do is circle2 rectangle, and then I'm going to do circle2.getRectangle. So this will make, convert circle2 to a rectangle instead of circle1. And then all I do is I change everything else after that, circle2 rect.x, circle2 rect.y. And then I go down here to when I actually draw it to the screen, and I do circle2, which is the source that I want to work with now. Circle2 is the new source image, the transformed one, and then circle2 rect, which is the rectangle of circle2. And I hope all this makes sense. I hope it's not too confusing, but just real quick, this is the source image that we loaded in, and then this is the transformed image that we transformed to make smaller. And then this is when we convert it to a rectangle, so we can actually be able to draw it on our screen. And then this is the designated coordinate location for the image. And then down here is where we screen.blit is using the source image right here, circle2, and then drawing it onto our screen as rectangle, circle2 underscore rect, which we defined up here. And then now this should draw the circle that we want on the screen. So I'm going to go ahead and hopefully there's no issues. I'm going to run all this. All right, look at that. We now have our circle drawn onto the screen. So now we can see the full circle. This is the size I prefer for now. And this is the location. Keep in mind 100, 100 is about here. And then that's where we're drawing the image. So for example, if I want it in the very center of my screen, the very center is 500, 500 for me because that's the size of my screen. But if I want it at the center, I want to probably put it more at 450, 450. Because, let me go and restart and run all. Because the coordinate location that it takes is on the top left, and so now it's more in the center of my screen. But that's just a quick side note. All right, so getting on to the next part. So I'm going to go ahead and restart everything, clear the output. All right. So to talk to to explain further of what I'm talking about when we convert it to a rectangle, and this is important if you're trying to do any collisions or anything with your object inside of your game, it converts the image, this process converts the image to a rectangle. So Pygame sees this as a rectangle and not whatever shape and size your image actually is. So what we're going to be doing next is we're going to I'm going to draw like a rectangle around it to show you what I'm exactly talking about. And if you looked over here, it's this line right here. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be doing pygame.draw, and I'm going to be drawing a rectangle. And whenever we draw a rectangle, any kind of object to the screen, we're going to start with where it's going to be drawn, which is, in our case, screen. And then we want the color, which I'm going to label as black. And then we want, what image are we going to draw? We want to do the circle to _rect. Now, normally, if you just drew it as this, I should say is this, it's going to draw a complete circle. And circle. No, it's going to draw sorry, I'm getting myself confused. It's going to draw a rectangle. But if you just want to do like a border, if you want to just draw a straight border, which is what we want, then you can just put like another value after that. And in my case, I want it 1, and it's going to be showing me, that's the thickness of my border. If I do another number after that, it shows me any curvature, but I don't want any curvature on the edges of my rectangle. So what this is going to be doing is drawing a border, just like a border rectangle, and I'll show you what I mean. Hopefully there's no errors. Awesome. So yeah, it just draws a border rectangle right there. If I just did this, it would draw like a big circle, but that's a big rectangle, but I'm just trying to do a border. What I'm trying to show you, and I'm going to make my circle actually bigger. Do 200, so I can show you what I'm talking about. All right, restart and run all. There we go. All right, so this is what I'm talking about when I talk about we're drawing it as a rectangle. So when you draw the image onto the screen, we're creating this rectangle object of the image. And what what Pygame sees is this as a rectangle. So if you're doing any collision work, if you have like some kind of object coming, it's going to read like this area and this area, this area, and this area are actually part of the image that you loaded. So whenever you're doing this, keep that in mind that we converted it to a rectangle, and Pygame's going to read it as a rectangle. So keep that in mind. But that's what that's why I drew this boundaries to show, how Pygame sees this image. It sees it as a rectangle, not just the image, that we load in. The other thing I want to show you is what I'm talking about with the height and width. The height and width. Let's say I do 200, 400. It's going to distort the image. Restart and run all. It's if you want to distort your image, you can do that by just changing the height and width values right there when you transform it. So and so that's what that does. What I'm going to put it back at 200. All right, so that is all the code that I'm going to be talking about and walking through today. This is how you load an object in. This is how you transform it, and this is how you draw the image to your screen. So we're going to load the image in. We're going to transform the image. We're going to convert the image to a rectangle so we can actually draw it onto our screen, and then we're going to draw it onto the screen in here. And keep in mind, I'm drawing it onto a screen inside of my game loop. So every time I hit this pygame.display.update, the end of the game loop, it's going to redraw that, the image, and it's all of our assets is going to redraw it. So that's why I put it down here in the game loop. But that's everything. And this is actually not necessary. That was just for showing you the boundaries. But this is the entire code that I'm going to show you today. This is how you load. This is how you transform, and this is how you draw an image into Python with Pygame. So that is all for today. I really appreciate you watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. Thank you again, and bye.